The history of the northern frontier and the Oregon Territory is a fascinating tale of diplomacy, exploration, competition, and settlement. During the early 19th century, the United States and Great Britain navigated complex negotiations and geopolitical strategies to define their respective claims in North America, culminating in the establishment of the 49th parallel as the boundary between the two nations and the joint occupation of the Oregon Territory. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1783, officially ended the American Revolutionary War and recognized the independence of the United States. However, the treaty's provisions left some ambiguities, particularly regarding the northern boundary of the United States. The American and British delegations had mistakenly placed the source of the Mississippi River further north than it actually was, creating confusion about the border near the Lake of the Woods. This miscalculation necessitated further negotiations to clarify the boundary between the two countries. As American settlers pushed westward, the need for clearly defined borders became increasingly urgent. The Louisiana Purchase of 1803, which doubled the size of the United States, included territory extending west of the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. However, the exact boundaries of this vast acquisition remained imprecise. To address these issues, the Convention of 1818 was negotiated between the United States and Great Britain. This agreement established the 49th parallel as the boundary from the Lake of the Woods to the Continental Divide in the Rocky Mountains. This clear demarcation helped prevent conflicts and facilitated orderly expansion. West of the Rocky Mountains, the Oregon Territory became a focal point of interest for both American and British settlers. The region, rich in natural resources and teeming with fur-bearing animals, attracted trappers, traders, and settlers from both nations. In 1811, American entrepreneur John Jacob Astor founded the trading post of Astoria at the mouth of the Columbia River, marking the first significant American presence in the area. The Treaty of 1818 also addressed the Oregon Territory, which both nations claimed. Rather than risk conflict, the United States and Great Britain agreed to a policy of joint occupation, allowing citizens of both countries to settle and trade in the region. This pragmatic approach temporarily alleviated tensions and allowed both nations to benefit from the territory's resources. Throughout the 1820s and 1830s, the fur trade dominated the economic landscape of the Oregon Territory. The Hudson's Bay Company, a British enterprise, established a strong presence in the region, with trading posts and networks extending deep into the interior. However, by the 1840s, American settlers began arriving in significant numbers, driven by the promise of fertile land and a new life in the West. American settlers established trading posts and settlements primarily along the coast of Puget Sound and in the fertile Willamette Valley. These settlers, who soon outnumbered the British inhabitants, began to push for the formal incorporation of Oregon into the United States. Their call for annexation was bolstered by the ideology of manifest destiny, which held that Americans were destined to expand across the continent. The overland journey to the Oregon Territory became known as the Oregon Trail, a roughly 2,000-mile route from Missouri to the Willamette Valley. Thousands of pioneers traveled this arduous path in covered wagons, braving harsh conditions, disease, and the threat of attack. Despite the dangers, the promise of fertile farmland and a new beginning drew many to make the journey. The growing American presence in Oregon and the strategic importance of the region led to renewed negotiations between the United States and Great Britain. The two nations were determined to avoid conflict, but the stakes were high, especially concerning control of Puget Sound and Vancouver Island. These areas were crucial for their strategic harbors and resources. The Oregon boundary dispute reached its climax in the mid-1840s. Expansionist fervor in the United States, embodied by President James K. Polk's campaign slogan, 54-40 or fight, indicated a willingness to go to war for control of the entire Oregon Territory up to latitude 54°40. However, cooler heads prevailed, and both nations sought a peaceful resolution. On June 15, 1846, the Oregon Treaty was signed, which extended the 49th parallel as the boundary to the Pacific Ocean, with a slight deviation to ensure that Vancouver Island remained under British control. Puget Sound, along with its valuable ports, was ceded to the United States. This compromise allowed both nations to maintain critical strategic and economic interests without resorting to armed conflict. The Oregon Treaty of 1846 was a significant milestone in American territorial expansion. It peacefully resolved one of the most contentious boundary disputes of the era and solidified the United States' claim to the Pacific Northwest. The treaty also exemplified the diplomatic prowess of both nations, demonstrating that complex territorial disputes could be resolved through negotiation rather than war. The resolution of the Oregon boundary dispute paved the way for increased American settlement in the region. The fertile lands of the Willamette Valley attracted thousands of settlers, leading to the rapid growth of communities and the eventual admission of Oregon as a state in 1859. The establishment of clear boundaries also facilitated further exploration and settlement in the vast territories of the American West. The history of the northern frontier and the Oregon Territory highlights the complex interplay of exploration, diplomacy, and settlement that characterized American expansion in the 19th century. The successful negotiation of the Oregon Treaty and the establishment of the 49th parallel as the boundary between the United States and British North America were crucial in shaping the nation's northern frontier. This period of expansion, driven by the pursuit of new opportunities and the ideology of manifest destiny, set the stage for the continued growth and development of the United States as a continental power.